sometimes if it sounds too good to be true, it is.
We're the Armed Attorneys. Today we're talking about whether a person should get a non-resident license or permit to carry a handgun. Now stick around for our pro tip at the end because there is kind of a scam floating out there that you really should avoid. But before we begin, show your support for the Second Amendment by hitting that like button. And that brings us kind of to the first question in our discussion of why would somebody get a non-resident license or permit?
Yeah, well, I think there are really two issues we see come up over and over again. And the first one is you don't qualify for your own state's license. And that happens here in Texas all the time. The Texas restrictions on getting an LTC are actually really intensive. And so we have people call in all the time. They've got a very, very old felony deferred, and they just don't qualify. And yet, and we tell people get a Florida non-resident license all the time because the qualifications are a little bit more lax and the classes are really easy to find pretty much nationwide.
Right.
But so, I mean, that's one. And then, what's our second one, Richard?
Yeah, I'd say for me, it opens up more jurisdictions because, and some of these states have very widely accepted licenses and permits, but, no license or permit opens up all these states. And, we have a handful of states that don't recognize anybody. So we're never going to be carrying there unless we get a license or permit issued by that state. But I see a lot of folks get multiple licenses or permits because it opens up more jurisdictions to them. And so they can carry, and it's become less of an issue with constitutional carry going into effect in a lot of places. But it opens up that freedom, allows you to travel and carry and defend yourself.
Yeah, I mean, more states is always good, particularly if you travel quite a bit.
Yeah.
But we have to consider that there are not lots, there's a handful of states out there that, even though they recognize, let's say, a Texas license issued to a Texas resident, they're not going to recognize a non-resident license or permit. And those states are Colorado, Florida, Michigan, North Dakota, Pennsylvania, and South Carolina. So, and there are a couple others who, they say they only recognize resident permits, but they also have constitutional or permitless carry. So we don't really bother to go into those. But I mean, do you want to talk about what that actually, give an example of what that means?
Yeah. So for example, let's say you are a Florida resident with a Florida concealed weapons permit and you travel to South Carolina. No problem. Full faith and credit, reciprocity all day. But let's say you're a resident of the state of Alabama and you get a non-resident Florida license and then travel to South Carolina. Well, because they only recognize resident permits, they would not recognize your ability to carry under the authority of that non-resident Florida license. So that's what comes up. And I'd say one more thing to throw in just to make things a little bit more complicated is we have a short list of states that do not recognize non-resident licenses issued to their residents. The one that comes to mind for me is Louisiana. If you're a Louisiana resident and you obtain a non-resident permit or license from another state, they say, hey, we're not going to give that reciprocity because you're a resident of the state of Louisiana. We want you to get a Louisiana concealed license. And so we see that come up from time to time.
Right. And I think another thing to consider, generally speaking, carrying under that non-resident license is going to be very, very similar to carrying under a resident license. But there's one really big exception to this, and this is the federal gun-free school zones, right? Because there's a list of exceptions that get you within 1,000 feet of a school with a firearm legally. But I think the one most commonly utilized is probably that you have a license or permit from the jurisdiction in which the school sits. So if you are a Arizona resident, you're in an Arizona school zone, but you have a Texas non-resident license, you are not going to qualify for that exemption. Whereas if you're Arizona school, Arizona license, you do qualify.
That's a really good point. But I think that brings us to our attorney pro tip of the day about this scam we've kind of seen been going around on the internet, even in email campaigns and even text messages I've heard about. And that's these recognized in all 50 states licenses or permits. They're saying, hey, this license allows you to carry in all 50 states in the union. And what do you have to say about those?
Sometimes if something seems too good to be true, it is too good to be true. And this is one of those instances. Would it be absolutely wonderful if there was one license you could get that was recognized in all 50 states? Yes. Would it be even more wonderful if we just had nationwide reciprocity generally or nationwide constitutional carry? Of course. But none of those things are true. So it is a scam when you see, buy this one license and, you'll generally see it not accompanied by any real training or testing. And you have freedom to carry in all 50 states, you will get arrested. It is a scam. Be very cautious.
But we hope you enjoyed this content. If you did, consider subscribing, hitting that like button, and help us fight the anti-2A algorithm by sharing this video.
And please continue to question and comment below. Until next time, we're the Armed Attorneys.